Hey family, welcome to We've Got Issues. It is our regular and much anticipated discussion amongst a group of friends who've been battling out over ideas for more than 40 years. And today we have the esteemed opportunity to do it once again, taking what's in our group chat amongst ourselves and some of our other friends who've been friends for longer than we care to probably remember. But this week, like every week, we've got some good topics to discuss. And before we do that, I want to introduce these two guys to my right and beneath me, but only on TV. Only on TV. I got Ron Evans. Ron, say hello to people.
The truth comes out.
Hey,
there it is. There it is.
Well, 40 years.
That's right. Well, as a member of the proletariat class, thank you for acknowledging the obvious. Hey, Ron Evans, tech exec in Northern Virginia. I've been involved in tech for 30 plus years and love what I do.
Blah, blah, blah. Darin Gray.
Darin G, coming from Detroit, but living in LA the last 40 years, educator extraordinaire.
Yes. And of course, my name is Nick Cates, Los Angeles realtor and investor, and just always enjoy gleaning from the knowledge of these two gentlemen. So this week will be no different, and I'm sure we'll have some good stuff because this week our very own Darin Gray has the driver's seat and is going to tell us about what is on your mind this week, Darin Gray.
All right. So what's on my mind is opening the floodgates, and flood is in quotes, to modern sports entertainment. And it's just a throwback to Curt Flood and his challenging in Major League Baseball, which essentially led to free agency and ultimately to the NIL in college and the transfer portal. I think it was the Ed O'Bannon UCLA lawsuit that opened up the floodgates. What drew me to sports was, the brotherhood, the competition, the strategy, the intelligence. But it seems now that it's more about highlights and reels and of course, getting paid. Now, my first emotional twang that came about from free agency was Kirk Gibson. Now, Kirk Gibson was a Detroit baseball player, paid for the Tigers. We won, I think it was the 84 World Series with him. And, he was a Detroit guy through and through. And then he came to LA. And I remember watching that game that broke my heart. And there's a clip of it where he hit the game-winning home run in the World Series that eventually propelled the Dodgers to their championship. So you can roll that clip. It still breaks my heart. Not for Kirk, but for me.
High fly ball into right field. She is
I just graduated from college, and seeing that, tears were rolling down my eye because he was a Detroit guy, and since then, the quarterback for Detroit is now the quarterback for LA, and I had to, root against him, who I love, Stafford, when the quarterback from LA was playing him for I think it was the NFC championship last year. When I look at LeBron James, again, being a Detroit fan, hated LeBron James because of him always knocking the Pistons out. Then he comes to LA, and I root for LA when I'm not rooting for Detroit. Now I gotta love him. And even with USC, Caleb Williams, our Heisman Trophy first rounder, he came to SC, but he didn't have any pedigree. He wasn't recruited. He just transferred over, and then all of a sudden he became the face of SC. And I'm like, dude, we got a tradition. There's this thing, when you remember, you guys are old enough to remember Magic and the Larry Bird. Those guys didn't like each other. It was a big deal that they did a commercial together. Now these dudes are like hanging out together. and they're more concerned with their likes and everything. I have not watched a complete game of any sport, even SC, on television in years. The only time I actually sit through an entire game is if I'm going to one of the games with the fellas or going to it with my son. That's the only time I can really get into sports, but I'm not really there for the sports. I'm there for the fellowship. So, Cuba Gooding Jr. said it the best, show me the money. And for that, you look at the fantasy guys, the sports gambling guys, the social media, it's all about sports entertainment and making money. It's not about sports anymore. When I see a guy, dribbling up the court and pulling up for a three instead of letting the clock run down, that's not emotional intelligence. He's going for his highlights. He's going for his stats. It's Detroit or SC, heaving the ball down, on first down when we need to establish the running game. That's to get, your quarterback some reels so they can be up for the Heisman. So I just don't like sports the way it was. I long for the days. And I think one of our buddies was talking about the quarterback from his son's high school ended up going to Hawaii, and the coach didn't know about it. The kid just left because he got a better deal. This is high school. So where am I? Do I got to go to Pop Warner to get some good football? I don't know. That's my take.
Ron, I know you're chomping at the bit to jump on this one. Take it on.
Yeah, Darin making a persuasive argument for the plantation mentality when it comes to football, and you articulated the owner's position very well. You would do well in the House arguing this. So here's the problem, and Michael Wilbon, was the first person I heard that labeled the NFL, having a plantation mentality. The problem is, while I agree that you don't have the same connection to the players as we once did, it's undeniable that in 2003, 2004 at the Coliseum, when Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and Lindell White were filling all 93,000 seats, Pete Carroll was making millions. The school was making millions, but they weren't making anything. Okay, and there was a power imbalance there that had to be addressed, be it at the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball. There has to be a power sharing, and I think NIL is something that it's the Wild West. I'm not in favor of how it's being done right now, but there had to be this breaking of the chains, metaphorically, of the university and the college coaches making millions and the players being told that you're getting a degree, aren't you lucky? And anybody that thinks that, and I was one of those that thought that if you're getting a free education from USC or Stanford or wherever, you should be thankful because it's a $200,000 or I guess now $400,000 education. I commend the Netflix show Last Chance University or Last Chance U, because what you really learn is it really is a plantation mentality of, I need you to come to pick a school, UCLA, because they're in league with the devil. I need you to come to UCLA, and I really don't care if you take basket weaving or not, because I just need you on the field. And what, you want to take engineering? No. You want to take business? No. I need you to take basket weaving because I need you to be at the at study hall and then go to practice and film school and on the field. So they are indentured servants, and they are serving at the pleasure of the institution. You take that to the NFL, it's no different. There's only 32 teams. Okay, you can't take your skills and get a similar salary in Canada or the USFL or whatever the thing's called that we have now. So the power dynamic was not fair. The pendulum has swung a little too far, certainly in college, but I don't have a problem with that. And I will leave you with this. One of the things I remember talking to a buddy who we were talking about European soccer. And I said something like, well, aren't you upset that Jose Mourinho, the coach of Real Madrid, has left and certain players left to go to other teams. And he said, Ron, I root for the jersey. He did this. I root for the jersey. And that's how I am about USC. I root for the jersey.
I hear you. I'll just throw my 2 cents in because I don't have a strong opinion either way. In certain ways, I emotionally resonate with Darin in the sense that with most things in sports in particular, I've grown a little bit of a cynicism and a little bit of a callous, emotional callous about, getting too heavily invested. Because I did at one point have favorite players. Like Marcus Allen was one of my favorite players of all time. And when I saw how he could be treated with the Raiders for reasons that had nothing to do with his performance or his ability, and then be basically shunted off after being the guy, and then, having, Bo Jackson be brought in and he has a block for Bo Jackson, and then he's not getting playing time and all that stuff, right? I started to reconsider what seems to be really important here. It seems that there are things outside of winning and losing and all the different things that we're taught growing up playing sports, love of the game, commitment to your team, your band of brothers, whatever all that is, right? That stuff started to slip away from me, going all the way back then. And that's aside from the monetary issue of guys going for the bag. I mean, I get it. And I think that they should. And on the other hand, I resonate with Ron and what you're saying about that, it's important and it's right for the players, whether it be at the college level or the professional level, to participate in the spoils of their craft just as much as the owners. But I'll insert this because it is a capitalist kind of a view, which is that, let's just drop the pretense that any of these leagues or whatever it is about purity of sport, particularly at the college level. We saw for many, many years that, this is a business that is not here to serve higher education or amateurism or any of those things. It is a pure market-driven thing where, like Ron was, or where Darin was mentioning, I can't remember whose point this was, is that the universities and the leagues and the people behind the scenes who don't throw, catch, or run are getting the lion's share of the spoils, and the kids are able to live a dream that they've had since they were maybe kids or whatever, but that doesn't have the same level of monetary compensation. And if that compensation comes with some lack of commitment to a particular team or institution, I've grown to the place where I'm like, okay, it is what it is. It's hard, to your point, Darin, to cheer for the jersey where you can't cheer for the people who wear the jersey. Unlike the Arsenal example that Ron gave, where people maybe just culturally in other parts of the world can commit to the jersey no matter who's wearing it. That's never been the kind of the U.S. paradigm. We get more into players, I think, than we do teams. For the most part, even though you're not going to become a New York Yankee fan if you're a Dodger fan just because Mookie Betts or somebody, goes and plays for them or whatever. Right. So you have to be able to hold both those things in your mind at the same time. And it takes the temperature down for me, even with USC. Last thing I'll say, I remember when one of our friends was saying, oh, no, not one of our friends, Darin. This is one of the most profound things that you helped me to see that has helped me to put everything in perspective. When we had Clay Helton as the coach, and I couldn't understand how the university was making the decisions they were making about who to employ as their coach and all the different things that were going on. And I was like, this is, and even before Clay Helton, it was, Sarkisian and Kiffin and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, who is running this organization making these kinds of decisions? And it came to a head with Clay Helton, and Darin said, words to this effect, winning football games is not important to the university right now. They've got other priorities other fires and priorities that they're more important to them, that they want to just make sure that whoever's coaching this team isn't going to bring more, scrutiny to the university and put more fires in place. Clay Helton for right now is that guy. Right, they had all other kinds of scandals and financial and wrong and personal wrongdoing and all that kind of stuff that they were more that were more important to them. And so once I realized that, your eyes are not deceiving you. They really don't care about this like you care about it. So you need to not care about it either, right? So that was a perspective that I thank you for, Darin, because until then I just couldn't wrap my mind around like, how's this happening? And now I'm in a much better place. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. I'll come out of the house and come out to the field with the rest of you for a moment.
Only for a moment.
Only for a moment. I'm going back in because the air conditioning's on. I get it. I get the imbalance. I get that, Kurt Flood really did empower athletes, and the O'Bannon, it was O'Bannon, right? The UCLA lawsuit.
No, he was the one that Ed O'Bannon sued for likeness.
Yeah.
He was the one that sued for name, image, and likeness.
So I get it, and I am supportive of anybody getting their bag. The thing for me is I miss what sports meant to me. As a, particularly as a, kid growing up, in a single parent household, these were the men of legend, guys and teams and brothers. Like I didn't have any brothers. And, watching, Roger Staubach and Drew Hill, and even though I hated the Steelers, watching, Franco Harrison, these were moments for me that really defined brotherhood and strategy and all of the elements of, what I had gotten myself from sports and what I had seen from people who participated in sports. And I just miss that because it's not there anymore. And it just is, I think Ron said the other a couple of episodes about like I'm the get off my lawn guy with the Kendrick Lamar thing, and it's true, I'm not looking for guys to play the NFL just during the season and go back to a regular job during the year like some of the guys in the 50s and 60s did. Not even saying that that's good or the abuse that Marcus Allen had to deal with. I just miss sports, and I don't have an outlet like I used to have with sports, that it was, I'm always going to be, Detroit, always. I'll always be Detroit, except for USC. I will always be Detroit, but I couldn't tell you much about any of the Detroit teams. Lions, I'll watch them in the playoffs, I'll keep track, or the Tigers, or even like the Pistons just were in the series, the Red Wings, I was a diehard sports fan. I'm just not anymore. And I'm mad at nobody for it. I just miss it.
So, I being out here on the East Coast during football season, I'm asked all the time, who's your team? And I tell them that, well, my college team is my alma mater, USC. When it comes to the pros, and I can basically say it almost verbatim. When it comes to the pros, you have to understand that I'm from Los Angeles, and in my lifetime, I saw the Rams and the Raiders leave town. So I'm a big college football fan because they're not going to move the big house out of Ann Arbor because they got a new stadium deal in Louisiana. And that happened in 1995, and I think the Rams and Raiders leaving LA. And it really shaped my perspective on the business of sports, because they left, and it's like, wait, what? To this day, when it comes to baseball, I can still name like probably 7 of the 9 starters on the Dodgers in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. I could. So, to your point, Darin, it's like, yeah, you grew up having their baseball cards and rooting for them. You knew their statistics, be it baseball, football, or whatever. And for me, the seminal moment was watching the Raiders and the Rams leave for St. Louis and to go back to Oakland. And it's like, oh, okay, it's not about the fans anymore, or was it ever? It's about the money. And
well, the Dodgers did come from Brooklyn, so I'm sure the Brooklyn folks.
Yes, as did the Giants came from New York as well. Yep. So it's always been about money. They were able to create this facade about loyalty, and yes, free agency sort of pierced that bubble. But it was always about money. We were just young and thought that they really cared, but they were just trying to get that bag, like you said.
Yeah. The other thing is that I think the whole infrastructure around sports in general, like with the betting and with the stadiums that have like all the other, multiplex, things connected with them, and getting public money to be able to do private, for the benefit of private companies and stuff with the teams and everything, has really created, again, this dynamic where everybody's trying to take a bite at the apple. So the fans are now trying to turn their fandom into like some kind of monetary stream that they can do with the betting. And of course, the betting companies are like, yes, please bring us that money because the house always wins, right? It's all of that. And so I think we're even seeing that like in our political life. Like, I think the reason why our politics is the way that it is that people almost approach being an American like a team sport. You're either on this team or you're on that team, as opposed to saying we only got one team. We got one jersey we all get to wear. And here's the beautiful part about it. We don't have to be from the same part of the country. We don't have to worship the same God. We don't have to be the same color. We don't have to have the same whatever. But we see there's a benefit in being on Team America. But now, just like with sports and so forth, everything has become so fragmented that people can now monetize the options that are out there. And so there's so many options and so forth. And people can personally benefit from that idea that there isn't that cohesion that we are, I think, all lamenting a little bit in the sports paradigm, where there was a friendly idea that when you're committed to this team, whether you're a coach, player, or fan, we're all committed to the same thing. And when that started to come apart, where everybody's just running to the next deal, the next whatever, it created, I think, this whole atmosphere that is starting to tumble, into many, many areas of our life.
Yeah, you said something that just reminded me. One of our buddies invited me to the Staples, with Crypto Arena or something, the Staples Center. Yeah, and I was up in one of the boxes, and I had such a hard time because I couldn't pay attention to the game because there was so much going on, the screens and the food and everything. And I remember going to the Great Western Forum in the bad seats and watching a basketball game. And that's what I was there for. Like, I won't go to a basketball game at Crypto or the new Intuit Dome because it's just too overwhelming, because it ain't about the sport. I was like, oh my God, it was sensory overload. I was so overwhelmed by the experience.
Nick, do you want to take this one or shall I?
Oh my God!
I'd rather be at home watering my lawn than at
tell the kids to get off it at the same time.
I went to rooms in the big house, and I couldn't believe, as I was looking down on the plantation, I couldn't pay attention because of the scallop bar.
High
class problems, Dan. High class problems.
Darin, I feel for you.
I just couldn't. So when I get invitations to go to Crypto, or I just say no. When folks are like, hey, I got a box, I just can't.
My heart bleeds.
You're one of the people.
Bleeds.
That's right.
I just can't. I can't.
Yeah. Wow,
you will go on the porch, but you won't go into the field. But I'm keeping it real. I'm on the porch with y'all.
I'm not on the porch. I'm behind the screen door. Look at
What a struggle you must have had that night, Darin. What a struggle.
There's Martin Luther King and Darren Gray.
The TVs on the wall, the competition over here, the Laker girls over here.
It was sensory overload.
Yes. Speak to the plight of the common man, Darin.
I missed part of the game. I couldn't even see the game because they were like, "Oh, we got this competition over here, and the game's playing. They don't stop." It was terrible.
Darin, what we love about you is your problems are so relatable.
Yes.
It wasn't my tickets. One of our buddies got tickets.
Mean that you got fancy friends. It's not just you.
I got fancy friends.
You're
as do you all. Yeah.
Well, you've definitely put that into perspective. We see exactly where you're coming from now.
Wow.
We see exactly where you're coming from. So, with that, why don't we transition right into your because I have a suspicion that your parting shot is hopefully going to relate to people in a way that your initial words for the week may or may not. So, why don't you take us there?
All right, so a couple weeks back, I lost some points with my fellow podcasters here for not having seen The Wire. I remember hearing about it, but it wasn't my kind of thing. And so I was like, all right, you know what? Before we meet again, I'm going to watch the entire 5 seasons. And so I binged it. And a couple things. One, the first 2 seasons were incredible, just incredible. Third season was good. The last 2 seasons, I finished the last 2 seasons because I wanted to have said that I have watched it. But the first 2 seasons, with Stringer Bell and just it was just so complex and everything, and they weren't afraid to kill people, from the show, long before Game of Thrones and all that other stuff. But here's some things that struck me from the show. One, they were dealing with some issues that we're dealing with right now. The 3 that came up was like the open air drug market thing. Like, no, that's a thing, like here in LA where, we're dealing with that where, there are parts where the city just gave up, the political corruption. Like, what do we have? Like 9 city council members from LA going to jail. And then the homelessness. I mean, it was like, as I was watching this, looking at their flip phones and their Blackberries and, the old cars, I had to remember that this was 20 years ago. And it's the fact that it's so relevant to today, not, the police drama and the wiretapping, but the story behind it was just fascinating. I mean, it was, they talk about The Simpsons, being able to predict the future, but this show, is LA right now. So, I really, like I said, the first 2 seasons, I was captivated. Third season was good. The last 2, I was like, okay, yeah, it got a little predictable and it got unnecessarily gory for me.
Okay, so I'm really, really happy you saw it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now you can enter the conversation about which was the best season, and I would say season 1 was amazing. It set the expectation of this is not anything you've seen before. And by the way, just a fun fact: when the season 1 came out, the New York Police Department called the producers of The Wire and said, "What are you doing?" And the reason they were upset with the producers of The Wire, and you have to remember that The Wire was produced or written by a former Baltimore police detective and a former Baltimore Sun reporter. Okay, so they knew what they were talking about. So the New York PD calls the producers of The Wire and like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "What's wrong?" Gang members in New York saw season 1 of The Wire, and they took the tips from that show on how to handle cell phones, burners, and how to evade the police. They got the idea from The Wire. That's how deep the research was on The Wire and how impactful it was. I would say this, Darin. Season 3 was about Amsterdam and the open air drug market. And I went to Amsterdam, first time in Amsterdam, and my wife and I were there, and I'm like, honey, I gotta go see the red light district. I gotta see the red light district. And she said, okay. So we went to the red light district, and I was expecting something really salacious. And it's about 2 blocks long. And we started one in, and by the time we got to the other end, I was like, wow, the Netherlands gets it. They know that this activity is going to go on. Theme of The Wire in Amsterdam. And they say that within this area, we're going to regulate it. We're going to have the health inspectors. We're going to make sure we tax it. We're going to make sure that it's safe. Now, you try that outside of this area, that's your behind.
Mm-hmm.
And The Wire explored that in America in season 3, and America showed itself lacking because we're like, oh, no, we can't allow that. It's like, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of a European country that says, we know it's going to happen, and here's how we're going to address it. The Wire really showed the puritanical nature of this country and how even the right idea will not be implemented because it's not politically correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and that was a good, like I said, the first 2 seasons were amazing. That was a good season because it really, had me thinking about current day. But the last 2 seasons, it hung on too long for me because it wasn't clever. It was brute force, and it was, I can shoot more people. And a couple of times I'm like, folks just walking up and getting that close and shooting people in the head. I was like, that's been done.
But let me ask you a question. Season 4 was my favorite season because it was about the education system and the failings of the Baltimore school system, which was a metaphor for LA or Detroit or New York, whatever. Didn't you find as an educator that what those kids had to go through just to get to class was impactful?
Probably because I saw it firsthand when I worked for the district. It didn't hit me the same way. Like I worked in alternative schools, and my kids had to take circuitous routes to get to school because they couldn't go through gang territory. So
right.
So that for me in LA, from the the late 90s through the early 2000s was way they depicted what they were depicting. It was interesting. They were focusing more on heroin, and crack was the big thing at the time. It was a little bit like, I was like, I don't know why they just didn't go with crack, because the crack industry, which devastated Los Angeles, and we had crack babies and all that other stuff at that time, was in Clinton's war on on drugs and all. That part didn't impact me as much because I had already seen it. Like I always tell folks, like, I don't go see teacher movies or education movies because they piss me off, because they never really capture what the real deal is. And they, and it's a TV show, so they're going to sensationalize that, that aspect of it and make it worse than it actually is. For the majority of schools, you have a very small percentage of knuckleheads. Most of the kids are there to learn. And the way they depicted the education system in that for public schools, I thought it was a disservice, because you don't have that many kids acting out. You have a small number of kids. Most of the kids are there to learn. And so that was kind of a trope for me, that, people always, they ping the inner city schools that way. So that wasn't as good for me.
Okay.
Yeah. I wonder if that's an area where your ability to see beyond, to read between the lines and the subtext, that even though it may be a bit overblown, that it may not be that overblown, and that the problem that it's addressing, is worthy of the emotional investment of watching it and being able to say, now you can get into other areas of criticism. You can look at the performances. You can look at the, all these different things that made The Wire enjoyable. Sometimes it's like me watching a movie about inside the Hollywood machinations of what goes on in Hollywood. If executed well, even if it's a bit arch, or it's not, it's more overblown than it is, if it's done expertly enough and gets to points that really are worthy of picking apart, I can enjoy that. And I think in the same way, that's The Wire. Like most of us, The Wire was dealing with things that most of us who have had a relatively middle class, whatever, even though I went to public school and all that kind of stuff, it's dealing with stuff that you don't deal with in your day-to-day existence. And that's what made it, so revealing. And I think that even if you look at shows about public school throughout the history of public school, the one that Sidney Poitier was in,
To Serve with Love.
Yeah, To Serve with Love or the Blackboard Jungle or any of these things that deal with public school where you have like historically people from different socioeconomic or different racial or different ethnic or different whatever. You have all these things going on and it's never truly been resolved. And today, if you like just dropped in on any public inner city public school, you probably see a lot of the same problems that The Wire was trying to deal with. So I appreciate it from that standpoint, and I lament the fact that you gave up the street cred that you could have had for just saying I loved it every season, and you went ahead and bashed the last 2 seasons anyway. I lament that for you because I was hoping you would redeem yourself from the end of your previous discussion, about sports.
I did say I like the show. I just don't think the last 2 seasons were as good. And sometimes when I'm watching. Even in real time, you can tell when writers leave because they got a better deal or part of the production. You can tell in the change of the style. They tried, but the last 2 seasons with Marlo was a typical gangster one man who leads the entire thing. It was something that we've seen before, and maybe because I'm looking at it 20 years later that I've seen maybe derivative works of The Wire, so it didn't impact me the same. Like maybe all the shows I've seen since then were versions of that, so it wasn't new to me. Maybe that could be the case. I'm not saying it just didn't. It wasn't as it didn't hit me the same way that the first 2. Okay. I love me some Omar. I love me some Omar. I was sad when he bought it.
Spoiler alert.
Right.
So Darin, I think Marlo played a very vital role in the story arc. And first of all, I think season 5 was trash. Absolutely. I think you're definitely wrong on season 4, but that's what good conversation's about. Marlo was a really critical character, and I'll explain why. When you think about what Avon and Stringer were trying to do, especially Stringer, he was trying to wash the money and go legit. If you remember that, there's the scene of him overlooking the Baltimore harbor from their condo, and he's like, "We don't have to dream no more." Stringer wanted to go legit. That was his whole problem or challenge with being in the industry or in the drug industry and still going to community college to take econ classes and having Robert's Rules of Order for a drug meeting. They represented, especially him, I want to wash the money like others have done, Italians, Jews, Irish. He represented that faction. Ultimately, we know what happened. Marlo represented this is all I'm good at. This is who I am. And if you remember, they tried to get him to go to some meetings and look, wear a shirt and tie and everything. And that's not who he was. Mm-hmm. So he stayed true to himself, where Stringer and Avon, especially Stringer, they wanted it to be something they weren't. And I think that's why Marlo was a very critical role in the arc.
Well, I think Avon was more like Marlo than Stringer, but but I don't know if you remember Romeo Must Die with Aaliyah and gosh, what was his name? The Asian guy Korean fighting master, Jet Li.
Okay.
And it was the same thing. The character, the dad, he wanted to go legit, Isaac O'Day, and there's one scene toward the end where the guy, I think it's the guy from This Is Us, I think it's him, Mac, and he says, I just want to rule the streets. And so that part has always been done.
Well, see, when you have watched The Wire like 4 and 5 times, like I have, you don't have to go outside the canon to give quotes. There was a quote that you saw where Stringer is talking to Avon, and they're drinking cocktails in like their strip club, and Avon tells Stringer, "I ain't a fancy businessman like you. I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners."
Yeah, I remember that.
And that's, you know, to your point, that's who he was. Avon and Marlowe were very similar. And
And I guess that's what, you know, Marlowe just didn't do it for me because we already had an Avon character. And then, you know, and he, you know, I love the tension between Avon and Stringer. I mean, I love that, where they were brothers and they ended up selling each other out. But there was always a tension because Stringer wanted to do much more. And I just think Marlowe was, I never quite understood, you know, like what value he brought to it because.
I think that Marlowe was the dystopian future of that Avon, that not even Avon could live up to. He was even more depraved in that way, if you want to use that, than Avon. So it's showing that even though Avon was the king at a certain point, because Marlowe didn't come up and was like an immediate threat. He was an unknown quantity at a certain point. And he just emerged and basically took away by force, you know, that which the guy who said, I just want my corners, what he wanted, right?
But if Avon doesn't get locked up, Marlowe doesn't become Marlowe. And his opportunity. The thing I loved about Marlowe's, Avon would have killed him because Avon had more muscle. They had the gun. But anyway, the thing I loved about Marlowe's organization were Chris and Snoop. Man, I love me some Chris and Snoop. I mean, because they were just ruthless. You know, and they were tactical. They practiced. I mean, that part I liked about you know that.
You know the interesting thing, right? Don't forget your point. What's the young brother who was a corner brother from the very first season until the very end, who was actually working with the police at a certain point.
Bodie
was the emotional center of that show that went all the way from the beginning to the end, and he was the one that, in my view, represented us. He represented us, the viewer, going on that ride to a certain extent and basically coming out the back end and basically saying, this is all there is. This is all there was. This is all there ever will be. And we're, you know, there always has to be an emotional core to the whole thing. I feel like Bodie was that.
I was sad about him. And then Michael B. Jordan as a kid. What the heck?
Oh, I mean, Wendell Pierce. I mean, the list of actors that started there is unbelievable.
I'm surprised that more of them did not go on to do other things. Like, I mean, you get the big names, like even Wood Harris, who played Avon, or the guy who played Marlowe. He went on and did, you know, has done other stuff, and obviously Idris Elba and stuff. But some of those more minor characters who were amazing in their own way, you know, it's just amazing. And more than
Herc went on to a lot of stuff. The cop Herc, he went on to a bunch of stuff. I mean, I really like I said, the first 2 seasons, I was like, wow, I see what they're talking about. The third season was a little bit more reflective, and I was like, okay, all right, you know, it really hit home. So that one was more of a reality connection, not a TV show. I like, you know, that was more of a, you know, wow, we're dealing with the same mess that we've always been dealing with. It's just those last 2 seasons that I was like,
Well, we disagree on season 4, but I think that season 3, another reason why 3 and 4 are like my 2 favorite, is I love in season 3 what they did, where they showed the morning operational review, which is very similar to any ops review in a company, where it's like stand up there and talk about your numbers, which is great. But it also showed how they don't really care about the victims. They'll label a homicide as, you know, suicide or whatever, or like, oh, tell me where the body was. Was it in Baltimore County or was it in Baltimore City?
George Gascon, man, George Gascon.
You know, and
LA.
Yeah, and you saw how the people were nothing more than statistics that they had to speak to, and they really didn't care about the underlying people. They just want to make sure their numbers were headed in the right direction.
Our former DA did that. You know, he kept, you know, turning felonies into misdemeanors to say the crime was down. And I'm like, it's not down. Exactly. The reporting is is skewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Darin, I'd give you at least a partial redemption.
Do I get points back? Do I get points back?
You know, for I mean, that's not an insignificant binge. That's a pretty
from the time we last met to now, I binged
right.
the entire show.
Yeah.
And I was determined to finish it last night. I was determined. I was like, I'm not going to bed till it's done.
Well, I do think that making it through season 5 was admirable, because again, that was not one of the best seasons. That was the worst season by far. But I would
that
definitely
was a season about the newspaper, right?
Yeah, the newspaper.
Yeah,
I like that season.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I thought it was all. I was a little thrown a little bit by the. I guess it was season 2 with the docs or the. Yeah, that threw me for a bit, but I caught on, you know, and it was cool. But I enjoyed that. I pretty much enjoyed all the seasons in different ways, right? Once I got along with what they were trying to do in the season, I could kind of roll with it. But we're way past time on this one, Darin, and we're gonna give you your kudos. And we'll see what the people think about what we've had to say here today. As always, we invite your comments and your evaluation of what you've heard, and really offering your actual feedback and your thoughts on any of this or any of the other topics that we've discussed. So leave a comment, certainly like and share with other people who might also want to engage with it. And you know, until next time, guys, we're gonna we'll see what we come up with next time. And again, I've learned something as always, and I hope you guys have too. So we'll see you guys all next time on We've Got Issues. See you next time.
See ya.